Look at all this snow. I feel like going for a walk. It looks so pretty. Look at this. Oh, what's this? Hard to swallow pills. Manufactured 2032. Must be a message from the ghost of Christmas future. What could possibly be hard to swallow in 2032? AMD still loses. Okay, so this is gonna be the be-all, end-all review video of the 7900 XTX. We're gonna cover everything from out-of-the-box benchmarks, max overclock benchmarks, the power draw, the flaws with the architecture. We've got rasterization performance and ray tracing performance, 1080p, 1440p, and 4K. This is going to be probably the most comprehensive video I've ever put together. Now let's start with the model that we're going to be using for review today. It is the Power Color Hellhound model. Why did I get this one? Well, simply put, you guys know me, it was the cheapest one on Newegg that was not a reference model. Now, in terms of performance, this thing was an absolute gem to work with. Highly recommended. You don't need anything else other than this card. For some reason, even though it only has two 8-pins, the power limit on this thing actually goes up to 425 watts in the software. You're going to see that coming up here as well. So the fact that it only has two 8-pins did not hinder the performance of this card whatsoever. Now, the first thing you need to know about this model specifically is this cooler runs so well and so cool that this one actually boosts out of the box to 3 gigahertz in 1080p, right? So going forward, you're gonna see the overclocking headroom in 1080p isn't as much as 4K, right? Just because this thing boosts so damn high by itself. So what you're gonna see is out of the box, this card is like an overclocked reference one, right? If that makes sense. Okay, so first thing we're gonna do is I'm gonna show you the cards that we're comparing this against, and then we're gonna talk about power limits and power draws first, because going into the benchmarks, it's very important that you know how much power each card is pulling, because we're gonna talk about architectural efficiencies at the end, because hint hint, that's gonna tell you why AMD did not push this card as far as it can go. Okay, so first off, these are the cards I used for the review today. Okay, now this is really important what we're going to go over here. This one is the 3090 Ti EVGA. This one did not have a power limit on it, okay? Now, a Plague Tale is the game that had the highest power draw in today's review, and this one pulled almost 600 watts in 4K in a Plague Tale, right? Now, the new one, Requiem. This is the 6900 XT Gaming Z Trio. This is an XTXH variant, so this one actually overclocks as far as the 6950 XT. So the numbers that I show you today, you can basically assume they are 6950 XT numbers. Also, this one didn't have a power limit. This one pulled about 420 watts in 4K in a Plague Tale. This is the 4080, just a reference one here, stock one. This one, now this one's interesting because it only has a power limit of 355 watts, I believe, 350. Now, I could not flash another BIOS on this one to increase the power limit. I also chose not to shunt mod this one for this video because I want to sell this before Christmas. I want to get rid of it, right? If I shunt mod it, it makes the resale value quite difficult, right? So anyway, long story short, this one pulls a maximum of 350 watts, okay? Keep that in mind going forward here. This one, this is the Hellhound here, right? This is the 700 XTX. Now, this one had a power limit of 425 watts. Currently, at the moment, there is no way to remove the power limit on this one. We're probably waiting for more power tool or the EVC2 unlock, right? But for the purposes of this video, this one pulls 425 watts, and I will confirm that later with you with the wall-o-meter. So there's no fakery business with this one, right? And then this one's the 4090 Gaming X Trio. This one has a 600 watt power limit, but this one only pulled about 400 watts in 4K in a Plague Tale, right? So 400, 425, 350, 400, and then this monstrosity was 600 watts. If you take a second and step back and just look at this table, this channel would not be possible without the absolute insane support that I receive from my supporters in the Discord. There's over $7,000 worth of hardware on this table. None of it sponsored, none of it sampled, all supporter backed. You will not find this level of support or journalistic integrity anywhere else on the internet, because I am beholden to nobody but the people that support my channel, which is you guys. The fact that I'm able to do this just goes to show you how many people were sick and tired of sponsored, biased content. Also, Crocs in the link below, affiliate link. So AMD says that their 7900 XTX is a 4080 competitor. Okay, that's fine. So I'm going to include the numbers for these other cards, but we're mainly going to focus on these two, okay? Whatever, fair enough. Now, going into the benchmarks, you have to keep in mind that this card over here has 20% more power draw than the 4080. So when you max overclock both of them, what's going to happen? Let's go find out. Okay, so we're running defaults here on the graphics card, and we are doing 150 watts-ish on idle here in Windows. So let's see how much power it pulls on default. Okay, so we're at 150. Let's hit go. So let's see what it says here, 360, and then what's 150 to 550? That's 400 watts. So it's pulling 400 even though the Radeon says it's 360, almost exactly 400. Okay, so let's see now. Let's go custom and just bump this up all the way, apply. Okay, there we go. So now it's saying 415, right? This was the maximum. And then let's see. Yeah, that's an extra 50 watts. So 600 minus 150, 400. So it's reporting about 400 watt, or 40 watts less than what the software is reporting versus the actual wall-o-meter here, right? But there's always going to be some losses there anyway, so that's fine. So we'll just say that this card here has a 425 watt power limit with two 8-pins, which is awesome. Okay, so we've got the 4080 in there now, and the power draw looks like it's actually idling about almost 15 to 20 watts less than the 7900 XT here. Okay, so let's check. We've got the power limit slider all the way to the right. Let's crank this. See what this says. Board power draw 350, right? And 520. So what's 520 minus 140? 380? Yeah, so yeah, 380 watts total pull out of a 4080, right? So it looks like the 4080 pulls about 100 watts less than a 7900 XTX at the same maximum load. Now this absolute mess is the test bench for today. Don't worry about the mess. It's I'm going to be rebuilding this as my personal rig eventually. But we got the Z790 Apex, 13900K direct die cooled. This is running at 5.8 gigahertz. Special memory with special heat sinks running at 8200 megahertz, DDR5 C36. So this is literally the fastest PC on YouTube right now at the moment. And that's very important information because We want to remove the CPU bottleneck when we're doing GPU benchmarks. Okay, so we have a lot of data to go through and not a lot of time, so we're gonna blast through these. I encourage you to pause the video if you want to see one of them specifically. But I tested so many graphics cards and so many configurations that I couldn't fit all of the information on one page, so I had to do resolutions separately. So we're just gonna go hammer through this. OG Firestrike is up first, and the 7900 XTX max overclock destroys the 4080 by 20% and trails the 4090 by only 10%. In OG Time Spy, the 7900 beats the 4080 by 11% and trails the 4090 by 22%. So definitely smashing the 4080 across the board so far. Port Royal ray tracing is whatever, no surprises here. But actually, surprisingly enough, the 7900 beats the 3090 Ti in ray tracing and Port Royal for this one. So that's good on AMD for improving that much. So in terms of overall synthetic performance, the 7900 XTX actually has 11% overclocking headroom over the stock configuration, and it's actually 16% faster than a maxed out 4080. Very, very impressive. Now, synthetics are one thing. Let's go check out some real games. Tomb Raider 1080p, 4080, and 7900 XTX Max OC effectively tie each other, and the 4090 pulls ahead by 7%. But what about 1440p? Jojo's, what about 1440p? 1440p is the only resolution that matters. Basically, same margins for this one. Alright, so even as fast as my CPU is, you still need 4K to really show the difference between these graphics cards. Now, I would say the victory here goes to the 7900 just because the 1% lows are higher, but the 4090 blows the other two cards out of the water here in 4K. It does not have any competition. As far as I could overclock the 7900 XTX, it's still 34% slower than the 4090. Don't forget, though, with all of these benchmark numbers, the 7900 XTX is pulling 100 watts more than the 4080. The stock 7900 XTX numbers are the 350 watt numbers. Horizon Zero Dawn, 1080p, all graphics cards are basically the same. 1440p, the 4080, and the 7900 tie. Notable mention, though, the 7900 XTX max overclock is only 13% faster than their previous generation 6900 XT max overclock. So if you're a 1440p gamer, pay special attention to that 6900 XT as we go along, because you can pick those up right now for a hella good deals. All right, 4K, we see some larger margins here. The 7900 and the 4080 tie again, though. Also keep in mind, it is pulling an extra 100 watts. And then they both trail the 4090 by 37%. Assassin's Creed Valhalla is up next, and even in 1080p, you can see that 7900 XTX is creeping up on that 4090. So game optimizations play a massive role when it comes to architectural performance. And in 1440p, the margins are basically the same, but the 4090 is starting to pull away just a little bit. This is a really graphics intensive game. So in 4K in this game, though, the 7900 beats the 4080 by 15%, which is pretty notable. And then it gets beaten by the 4090 by that 15% as well. So it made that 15% performance back by being an AMD sponsored title. Now, to flip the script here, this is an NVIDIA sponsored title, Plague Tale Requiem. You can actually see the 3090 Ti has the same 1% lows as the 7900 XTX max overclock, which is a joke. It just goes to show you that you can skew the benchmarks either way you want, depending on whose titles you're actually benchmarking. So 1440p, you might ask, why is the 4080 losing now? Well, because this game pulls a shit ton of power, and we're already starting to hit that power limit, that early power limit on that 4080. You can tell because the 3090 Ti is already pulling upwards of like 500 watts by this point, and it's actually starting to catch up to the 4080 because it does not have a power limit, right? But again, you wouldn't be playing at 500, 600 watts, right? So in 4K, these results are probably the most interesting, right? Because the 7900 XTX beats the 4080 by 20% here, but it also has 20% more power limit, right? Now look at the 3090 Ti. It basically ties the 4080, but it's pulling almost double the power. So the 3090 Ti here is pulling 600 watts, and the 4080 is pulling 350 watts. So this one actually just goes to show you the 10 nanometer Samsung node versus the 4 nanometer TSMC node. It is crazy to look at that. And actually, you got to give props to Nvidia for just even being able to compete at all with Ampere at that last generation with this god awful node. All right, we're going to do some ray tracing now. Spider-Man High RT. The ray tracing implementation in this game is quite unique, right? Because even if you look at the 6900 XT, it's ray tracing the game just fine in 1080p, right? So it's not... This one is more CPU bound, I want to say. The DDR5 is doing a lot of the heavy lifting on this one, so the numbers in all of these kind of look the same. 1440p, the numbers basically look exactly the same, except the 6900 XT drops a little bit, right? So this is definitely the ray tracing in this game is CPU bound. It's not so much GPU. And in 4K, the 7900 XTX actually beats the 4080 in ray tracing in this game. Probably because that AMD graphics card doesn't hit the CPU as much as Nvidia cards do. Probably also why it's catching up to that 4090 in this game specifically. So even then, when you're benchmarking ray tracing titles, you can still bias the information any way you want to based on the title. You'll see that with Cyberpunk coming up. Now in Cyberpunk 1080p medium ray tracing, we're not even using the high preset, we're just using medium. The AMD cards basically don't even work in this game, right? Now, that's up to you whether you want to decide if that's fair or not. It is an Nvidia sponsored title, so are they doing some shenanigans here? Possible. But can AMD fix it in drivers? Who knows? Probably not. But yeah, so if you're a Cyberpunk player, you can't be using AMD cards at all. And then in 1440p and 4K, I'm not even going to go over these numbers because it's pointless. Again, the AMD cards just cannot run this game when ray tracing is turned on in any way, shape, or form. So it's not even worth going over the percentages for these two resolutions. All right, last ray tracing game we're going to look at is Gotham Knights. This is a new one, and this one seems to be the most fair game that I found when it comes to ray tracing. Because even look at the 6900 XT, it's actually ray tracing the game just fine. Now, I don't know what is being ray traced. It's just a toggle that says on or off in this game. There's no slider or preset. So I don't know what that means. Take these numbers for what you will, but it seems like the ray tracing in this one doesn't have a bias towards a manufacturer, I want to say. And then, I mean, even look at the 1440p numbers, the 6900, like basically all the AMD cards perform the same regardless of the resolution here. It is a very, very strange benchmark game for how I want to say. So 4090, we finally see a separation of the cards a little bit, but the 4080 and the 7900, they perform basically exactly the same. So it just goes to show you that this game doesn't really, like, it's fair. Like, I want to say this game is quite fair when it comes to its ray tracing. I will find out more how its ray tracing is implemented, but for now, this is what it is. And then maybe in the future, I'll keep this game around because it seems to be very unbiased. All right, so tallying up the total rasterization performance of these cards in 1440p, the 4080 and the 7900 XTX are tied and then they are both 12% slower than the 4090. Also, reminders, if your computer is not as fast as mine, that 4090 number might be way lower as well. It's very hard to get a card that powerful to scale at such a low resolution. Now, on the flip side, check out that 6900 XT and that 3090 Ti. The 7900 XTX is only 16% faster in 1440p than its last generation card. That also goes for the previous NVIDIA generation as well. The 3090 Ti is only 18% slower than a maxed out 4080 as well. So in 1440p, I want to say. So there you go again. The previous gen cars are where the value is. And before you fanboys go blow your load early, which I know you AMD nerds will, the 7900 XTX is pulling 100 watts more than the 4080 to achieve the same performance. And then in 4K, it paints a much different picture. The 3090 Ti is only 11% behind a 4080 in 4K. And then the 7900 XTX is 32% faster in 4K over its previous 6900 XT. And if you want to really look at it for a second, a stock 7900 XTX is only 8% faster than a maxed out 3090 Ti. So AMD barely beat NVIDIA's last generation flagship. Here's the other really shameful thing. The 4090 is 29% faster than a 7900 XTX while consuming the same amount of power. So it has 29% performance per watt ratio than AMD's flagship. So yeah, if you actually want to think about it, AMD is actually one generation on power efficiency and one generation on performance. 2 generations total behind NVIDIA. Okay, we're going to get into Warzone 2 numbers last, and it's very important that you understand what you're looking at as you look at the numbers, because I've been asked maybe 1,000 times, but Shootafoos, this optimizer over here said that AMD is faster. This hardware unboxed number over here said that it was faster too. So that's why I say it's very important that you understand what you're looking at. At the top of all of the graphics cards, you're going to be looking for GPU usage percentage. It's the percentage right next to the GPU. Now, what you're gonna see is the 4090 using 80% usage, the 7900 XT using about 90%, and then the 4080 using about 95 to 100%. And the FPS across these 3 graphics cards is almost the same. Why is that? Because Warzone 2 and Modern Warfare 2 are CPU bound. AMD graphics cards perform better when you have a weaker CPU. Mainstream tech tubers and shitty optimizers all have really slow rigs. They have slow PCs. They don't overclock, okay? Now, if you don't overclock your machine, maybe the AMD graphics card is the choice for you. Here at Frame Chasers, we max our systems out, so that data is not applicable to us, okay? The footage here is only 1440p, and even with a 5.8 gigahertz 8200 DDR5 system, we're still CPU bound in Warzone 2. NVIDIA's still faster. Thankfully, this time though, if you did happen to take the advice of one of these shit tubers or shit optimizers, at least you didn't get scammed like you did last time with the 6900 XT and the AM dip in Warzone 1. This card does perform just as well as the Nvidia ones in Modern Warfare 2/Warzone 2, right? So should you buy this graphics card? I don't know, man. It's like the 6900 XT is the elephant in the room here. There's too many elephants in the room for this one. If you want like budget ray tracing, budget streaming, all-in-one budget, right? You have a 3090 Ti, right? Which is way cheaper than $1,200. Or if you want like budget Warzone or budget Modern Warfare 2, the 6900 XT is hella cheap right now. And then if you want the best, you buy a 4090. And then the 4080 and the 7900 XTX don't really have a place. If you actually go back and check the footage again, the 6900 XT is like 15 FPS slower. Who cares? The 4080 12 gig is too expensive, and the 7900 XTX is also too expensive because the previous generation flagships are too cheap and too good. The 4090 is also too cheap and too good, as odd as that is to say, because the 4090 is literally the fastest in everything, including Warzone, ray tracing, single player games. It does not have a competitor. So it's either 4090 or last gen. This current gen shit is a waste of silicon. Now with the max overclock, the 7900 XTX was 7% faster than the max overclock 4080. Now, if you give that 4080 that 20% extra power draw as well, it will close the gap, obviously, and then they'll tie each other. So here is the massive issue with RDNA 3, right? This is how far behind AMD is right now compared to NVIDIA. The 7900 XTX has 26% more compute units, 25% more bandwidth, and it ties a 4080. So that means that AMD used 25% more silicon, more memory, more components, etc., only to tie the 4080. That means when RDNA 4 comes out, whatever the next generation is, they need to actually get their efficiency and architecture to match Ada plus the next NVIDIA one on top. So now, right now, they are 2 generations behind. AMD chose to increase their margins by going chiplet rather than competing at the high end. That's the kind of company that AMD is. They will choose margins and cost cutting rather than giving you a good product. That's why I'm so hard on AMD all the time. I don't want you guys to always cut these corners. Give us a massive die. Give us a massive memory bus. Compete with NVIDIA. Let's go, boys. Stop this nonsense. So on the plus side, though, the clock speed does scale quite well with this card, right? So when a power unlock actually ends up coming out, I mean, you wouldn't want to run your card at 600 watts, but just for scientific purposes, right? What if we clock this thing to 3.5, 3.6 gigahertz? What if we pull 600 watts? That's an extra like 40% power draw. Maybe we can get another 10 or 12% out of it, right? That'd be hella interesting. Then all AMD would need to do next generation is just fix the power draw, which is a better situation to be in than having broken compute units, right? Like you can always fix the power draw later as long as the architecture works, right? So there's nothing really wrong with the architecture in terms of the CUs or the FP32 units or whatever. The reason why AMD didn't push it is because it would look ridiculous if this thing pulled as much power as a 4090 and lost by 20 or 30% still. That would be a much worse look than this competing with the 4080 at the same power draw. You feel me? That's the only reason why AMD didn't push this thing. The power efficiency is basically worse than RDNA 2, and they had to make a judgment call. Do we try to compete at 600 watts, or do we compete at 350 watts? That's all. But anyway, guys, if you like the content and you learned something, hit that subscribe button, do all that YouTube SEO stuff, like, share, subscribe, comment down below what you thought of the 7900 XTX, and I will see you guys in the next one. Talk to you later.